White, bright white. It had coloured lights rotating round the underside of it. It had a dome on the top with what appeared to be portholes. It was going at no more than 30 kilometres per hour. But the strange thing was that it was making no sound. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. This was no doubt a real UFO. I'm convinced of this. It did not resemble anything that we have which is flying around in the sky. It had an effect on my police car radio. It blanked out the transmissions with a very heavy static effect. The object moved away from us and disappeared into the distance and appeared to land in a forest on a hillside.
Military and civil airline pilots from around the world have constantly reported having the most unusual experiences in the skies, including contact with UFOs. On September 19, 1979, a UFO followed a military aircraft over Germany. This is a close-up of the object. This B-52 Canberra bomber was flying over Edwards Air Force Base in California in 1954 when a UFO was seen near the aircraft. Here is a close-up of the UFO. Many pilots flying B-52 bombers reported seeing UFOs. This one was photographed at 12,000 feet in June 1966 over Utah by aircraft pilot Williams. An aircraft over Venezuela had a close encounter with a UFO. This photograph was taken from the plane. In June 1976, the British Airways Concorde was being filmed in flight when a small UFO appeared. After maneuvering around the plane in a manner that indicated intelligent control, the UFO flew off at great speed. This was witnessed by the whole crew. Here is a replay in slow motion. Of the hundreds of UFO sightings made by aircraft pilots every year, the most amazing one was filmed from a commercial airliner by passenger Gene Oldfield as the aircraft cruised at 9,000 feet over Stafford, England on April 2, 1966. The film clearly shows the ability of the craft to perform maneuvers and feats of acceleration far beyond our present comprehension. Here is the film again in slow motion.
Mikrouunia nopeampi Philips vedenkeitin vain 199. Anttilasta.
Hello, street hiker. Hyppää tossuun nyt! 175. Kipinkapin K-kenkään. Sieltä löydät sopivat.
Uusi ruohonleikkuri vai?
Ei käytetty. Ostin sen eilen Ivalosta.
Oot vaihtanut autookin.
Joo, kuopiolaisen torikauppiaan kanssa toissa päivänä.
Muuten missä sun vene on? Järvessäkö?
Meressä. Myin sen Hanko.
Mistäs?
Keltainen pörssi. Lehti, jossa ilmoituksesi ei maksa mitään. Lehtipisteistä.
Tää on mun sisko Kälviältä.
Hyviä uutisia Askosta. Nyt myydään Askon lattia tyhjiksi pilkkahintaan. Esimerkiksi tämä hylly 149. 7 päivän ajan.
Askossa on.
Lapsuuden aika on elämän jalusta. Palamme alusta, alamme alusta. Maailman turuilla kostumme suruilla, riemujen muruilla jaksamme taas. Vorivakken, 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 soitamme uruilla sun tunnelmaas.
Hyvät tilannekuvat saa tuuppimatta Panasonic-kaveroilla. Kuva-ahdissa on nyt ale. Panasonic alle 200. Alle 500. Huippuzoomi alta 1 000. Ja kaikki laukkukaupan päälle. Tämänkin tarjouksen tekee Kuva-ahti.
Raviväki juhlii elokuun 15. ja 16. kuninkuusraveissa Vermossa. Juhlantekijänä on Suomen hevonen. Vermon juhlakuninkuusravit 15. ja 16.8. Tervetuloa!
This was one of the early films taken of a UFO. The dramatic movement of the object showed rapid, almost instantaneous changes of speed and direction, which sparked intense curiosity and confusion among the public and scientific community. No earthly aircraft of the time could perform like this. While filming from a helicopter for the U.S. Navy on April 15, 1966, Lee Hansen, a professional photographer, shot these pictures of a flying object at Catalina Island, California. The craft, which had no wings or tail fins, was 30 feet in diameter and moving at approximately 150 miles per hour. No signs of a propulsion system were visible. This film, shot by James Waters in Colorado on July 23, 1963, shows a UFO moving across the sky at tremendous speed, followed by a second one. This is the same film at 1/12th speed. An analysis showed that no earthly aircraft could possibly fly so fast. In late December 1978, a record number of UFO sightings were being reported by radar operators and pilots in the area of Wellington, New Zealand. Just before midnight on December 30th, 1978, Quentin Fogarty, a reporter, and a television team took off in an Argosy aircraft to fly to Christchurch. Shortly after takeoff, Fogarty was informed by ground radar that they were being followed by several UFOs. During the 50-minute flight, UFOs were seen and filmed by the crew. The UFOs were described as having a luminous base and a transparent top. The objects were performing incredible aerobatics. This movement was captured on a single frame of film.
We have been present in your skies for hundreds of Earth years, but because of camouflage devices, you have been unable to observe us. Your cosmic evolution has now developed and the time has arrived for you to ascertain the existence of other life in your universe, resulting in us making our presence known to you. Our choice of contacts has been governed by their spiritual ability to comprehend our manifestations without anxiety or aggression.
The movements of our vehicles in the air, which you find so strange, is due to the fact that we have overcome the force which you call inertia and can fly in any direction instantly without experiencing any form of pressure change. Our propulsion systems work on the principle of electromagnetism, where gravity is of no significance. The three spheres sometimes seen below our craft are our drive systems, but can be detached individually to function as surveillance probes. The magnetic pole within the axis of our craft has many functions. It contains periscopic lenses for high magnitude observation and assists in the absorption of static power for recharging purposes.
It seems to me quite clear that a humanoid civilization will very likely try to find other humanoid civilizations in the Milky Way, if we just take the Milky Way as our place for travel. I'm not talking about extragalactic civilization now. The possibility of finding humanoid civilizations would always be of interest. Just like our astronauts, if we send them away in the search for life, will very likely try to find life which is a kind which is similar. If an astronaut has a chance to visit a planet where there's plant life or insect life, or another planet where there's humanoid life, he very likely will travel to the planet where there is humanoid life. And so it should not surprise us that the extraterrestrial visitors are always described as being humanoid.
The following sequence of photographs and film was taken by the astronauts. While in space, they had many encounters with UFOs that are now being revealed for the first time after decades of secrecy. On the Gemini 4 spaceflight on June 3, 1966, astronaut James McDivitt took a photograph of this cylindrical object. On the mission of Gemini 7, astronaut Frank Borman reported seeing these two objects flying in formation. On the Mercury 1 mission on February 20, 1962, John Glenn took this picture of two glowing objects. On the Gemini 11 mission, September 13, 1966, Pete Conrad and Richard Gordon observed a cluster of UFOs alongside their craft. They described them as large and very bright. During the Apollo 11 mission in July 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin saw these two UFOs, which were in orbit around the moon. The astronauts filmed the extraordinary glowing objects from the Apollo 11 spacecraft and reported to Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, that the UFOs even accompanied them to the moon. Many astronauts made their own private films while on space missions. This film, shot by James McDivitt in a long sequence, shows the remarkable aerobatic ability of UFOs. The astronauts faced UFOs so regularly that they became part of their everyday life. Because of restrictions, however, they were unable to describe their encounters to the public. One of the first to break the silence is former astronaut Brian O'Leary, a professor of physics and an astronomer from Princeton University, who comes forward for the first time to speak of the reality of visitation from out of this world.
What I do know from my own experience and from scientific investigations and experiments is that UFO phenomena and a range of other events are part of our reality, as incredible as they may seem.
Jetzt war es dann endlich soweit. Der erste Mann war auf dem Mond gelandet.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
During their moonwalks, a giant glowing UFO hovered above their heads. While in orbit around the moon, a huge object remained in view for a considerable amount of time before it suddenly disappeared. This UFO was seen above the landing site. This cigar-shaped UFO was photographed from the orbiting space module.
Down to the pad. That may have been a small deal, but that's a long.
On this very first trip into the unknown, the astronauts repeatedly reported to Mission Control that they were being escorted by unidentified flying objects. After landing on the moon, the astronauts stated that the UFOs were still present in the distance, hovering near a large crater. They were well aware that they had been observed throughout their entire mission.
It's also like sundown again. Yeah, powder. I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. No, May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month. When, much to my surprise, a pair of lovely eyes. Hello, Ryan. This is Houston. Hi there. We lost you for a while. Yeah, we sure did.
The momentous leap to the moon led to the dawning of the space age. Space travel opened up endless opportunities for mankind to explore new frontiers. NASA's plans are already well underway for colonies to be developed on other planets, beginning with Mars.
Motherships very rarely enter the Earth's atmosphere, but on one rare occasion, this remarkable film was shot of such a ship flying at low level over Germany in 1980. The object was seen by other witnesses in a nearby village who reported seeing 3 smaller craft emerging from the larger one. They stated that the craft was at least 100 feet long. This film of a cigar-shaped mothership was taken in Rhode Island, America on June 3, 1967. The leaf effect motion of the ship is common with most sightings. Craft of this size and shape have been reported all over the world. This aerial photo was taken by Inaki Ozis while flying at 8,000 feet in February 1968. Probably the same cigar-shaped mothership was photographed in Texas 10 days later. Over the following few days, an object fitting a similar description was reported by various witnesses.
Life aboard our motherships is ruled by a mixture of self-discipline, love of each other, and the merging of all spirits into one. Every need is catered for in respect of rest, recreation, and meditation of the soul. Illness does not prevail, but analyzation and anecdotal equipment is always ready in case of unexpected or unknown space microbes attacking the craft or our bodies.
Our food is comprised of a rotation of the many choices available on our own planet, but does not include the flesh of other life forms. We do occasionally take the fruit of certain organic trees and shrubs found on other planets, but only when they are known to be totally safe and pollution-free. Our water on the craft is produced by cosmic conversion. All byproducts are disposed of by the disintegration of the composite molecules. The psychological spirit of each of us is at one with the elements which surround us, and when we are at one with our universe, we are at peace.
My personal views on UFOs are that these are alien-piloted vehicles. When I say alien, I mean alien to anything we know. That possibly they come from other worlds, but I think it's highly likely also that they come from other dimensions, other time spheres, and that there isn't one type of alien coming here. There are probably many of them, all from different areas. When people report these things, we get such a variety of things reported, so many shapes, so many forms, and this appears to cause the confusion because there is such a variety of these things. But really speaking, if these things are visiting us from a whole host of different areas, one would expect them to be different forms, different machines, and I think this personally is the answer to it.
Meanwhile, we scan the skies with optical and radio telescopes of great power, which penetrate the universe for 15 billion light years, watching, listening for signs of intelligent life. Large numbers of people on Earth wait and watch in the hope that one day they may be contacted or visited by visitors from space.
In Russia, a large crowd of people who had gathered to watch a famous singer being filmed saw more than they had bargained for when a UFO suddenly appeared above their heads. The camera crew quickly focused their camera on the object and recorded an aerial display that lasted several minutes. The crowd found this more intriguing than the singer. Even she eventually stopped singing to watch the UFO. Numerous UFOs are seen over Russia regularly. These balls of light are identical to those reported in Belgium and the rest of Europe in 1990, which attracted extensive attention on top military and civilian levels. In April 1990, this cigar-shaped UFO was filmed over Russia by an amateur. These flying objects are now acknowledged by the Russian military as being alien flying machines.
The nucleus, the authentic nucleus of the UFO phenomenon must be our research field, and that is certainly worthwhile. however skeptics may talk about the UFO phenomenon, whether they call people who have encountered psychopaths or even scientists who concern themselves with UFOs as cranks, we simply have to accept, if we inform ourselves, that there's a small percentage of absolute authentic cases which represent the UFO phenomenon. And we must continue to investigate this nucleus. It will be worthwhile.
When I first saw my UFO, I always quote my UFO now, you've got to bear in mind I was dealing with something like this with the clinical mind of a policeman. So my immediate reaction was, well, what makes a thing like this tick? How does it go? How can you get an enormous machine like this which doesn't make sound? Why does it look so beautiful? Why did I see it? Why was it there? There are so many whys. And I knew I had to find out answers to these things. It was very, very difficult. There was no easy way of finding an answer to something like this. But it seemed to me that things naturally came my way. I started to receive reports from people as it became known I was interested in this subject. And then I had so many other incidents following this of close encounters. It was quite amazing, really, because these things seemed to know where I was, even when I wasn't on the initial hillsides where I found them. I had occasions when I would be driving down a country road, then suddenly one of these things would be in the sky, flying alongside me very close. And it was almost a cat and mouse game. And I had nothing but, no fear, never any fear, because there was never anything directed towards me which would indicate there was any hostility. And so I got a sort of affection for them. I had to keep thinking, what kind of technicians put something like this together? Because it was such an amazing thing. But I knew that this thing was not from here.
For the past 45 years, people from every country have reported seeing UFOs. The descriptions of these objects have been all too similar, despite the fact that the witnesses live thousands of miles apart. Witnesses include astronauts, pilots, scientists, and police, even presidents of the United States. Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan have spoken openly about their seeing UFOs. Since 1945, an estimated 5 million UFO sightings have been reported from across the world. Most sightings are of singular objects, although many are of 2 or 3. In some cases, large formations have been spotted. The greatest number of UFOs usually appear after 9 p.m. Although a large percentage of these sightings can be explained as natural phenomena, many cannot. Thousands of people are asking questions. What are these UFOs? Where do they come from? Why can't I see one? Why are they here? And more people want to communicate with the extraterrestrials, to learn more about them, get to know them, to understand.
Soon after the dawning of the 20th century, the winds of change began to blow. Events were to take place which would change the course of mankind forever. The atomic age had arrived. As man detonated weapons of immense power, lights started to appear in the sky in a way that suggested that something was following the course of events. The shattering thought imposed itself that we were perhaps not the only inhabitants of the universe. Since the beginning of civilization, we had been watching the stars, never dreaming that they, in turn, might be watching us. History was about to change.
Because these lights appeared suddenly in the sky over Washington on July 20th, 1952, moving from the White House to the Capitol, hundreds of people witnessed the extraordinary event, and it left them stunned. The lights instantly jumped from one position to another. They were also observed by high military officials who knew what the lights were trying to say. The public had never seen anything like this, whereas the military had already a long history of involvement with these alien visitors, but had kept it from the public. An immediate emergency meeting was called to formulate a plan to divert public attention away from the occurrences. From that day on, it was decided to place the subject under the highest classification of security. Then came the first announcement to mislead the public made by Chief of Air Intelligence, Major General John Sanford.
We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
From that day on, the biggest secret of the century began. How did it all start? After the first atomic bomb was detonated, more tests were made of the effects on the environment and human subjects to gauge the degree of contamination unleashed. No knowledge of the devastating long-term effects existed at this time. Here in New Mexico, an army base close to a small town called Roswell became the focus of attention on July 2nd, 1947, when Bill Brazel, a farmer, found a crashed disc-shaped craft on his land. The military arrived on the scene and quickly isolated the spot when they found debris scattered over a wide area. They also found 4 dead humanoid alien bodies who had been ejected from the craft. Because of many recent UFO sightings by the military, they accepted the existence of visitors from outer space who obviously possessed a technology which was far beyond our understanding. Now, for the first time, they had tangible evidence and were eager to learn its secrets. Roswell was the home of the 509th Bomber Wing, the sole American atomic bomber group. Major Jesse Marcel, an Army intelligence officer, was engaged on the recovery operation and asked Walter Haught, the Army Public Relations Officer, to prepare a story for the local newspaper.
He told me to prepare a release with basically the information that he gave me over the phone. When it was done, to take it into community and hand deliver it to the 4 news media we had in Roswell at that time, which is what I did.
The story was published in the local paper. The news was also prepared to be aired by the local radio, but Judd Roberts, the radio station manager, was warned not to broadcast it. Sorry.
The question that we ran into is the very next morning, some friendly person, probably from Clinton Anderson's office, called us from Washington and said, we understand that you have some information, and we want to assure you that if you release it on this matter, because it's not supposed to be released, it's very possible that your license could be in jeopardy, and so we suggest that you not do it. And he said, when I mean in jeopardy, like maybe 3 days.
Preparations were made at Roswell Army Base for the transport of the wreckage. Robert Shirkey witnessed the secret handling of the parts.
They came in the front door, straight down the hallway, and right out onto the ramp to climb into the airplane. And these were the people that were carrying parts of the crashed flying saucer at that time, UFO today, that I got to see. And that was the only thing I got to see. And it was very short, very quick. Colonel Blanchard, in order to get out of their way, had backed into the doorway of the ops office. And I stepped up to him and I said, Colonel, turn sideways. I want to see too.
On instructions from the Pentagon, Thomas Jefferson DuBose and General Ramey created a cover story saying the crashed object was a weather balloon.
But we used that in order to assuage the curiosity of the press.
The wreckage was loaded back onto an aircraft and flown out under cover of great security and secrecy to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The pilot kept silent for several years, but informed his wife after the story appeared in a newspaper.
I guess now that they're putting in the paper, I can tell you about this. I wanted to tell you for years. he said, I want you to read this article because it's a true story. And I not only know that it's true, but I'm the pilot who flew the wreckage of the UFO to Dayton, Ohio.
Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was considered the most technologically advanced research center in the United States. The wreckage of the Roswell crash was dismantled for analysis. The matter was considered of such importance that the orders came directly from President Truman. Under the cover of the CIA, Truman created a group called Majestic 12 for dealing with and covering up all information about UFOs. President Truman gave the task of handling UFOs only to the highest-ranking generals. After the Roswell crash, a special group of scientists was formed and facilities built to be prepared to deal with any further UFO crashes which would occur. Wendell Stevens was a lieutenant colonel in technical intelligence in the U.S. Air Force and is now a UFO investigator.
Now having an extraterrestrial vehicle and some bodies in their hands, didn't know when the next one would come down, where they came from, what they were going to do about it. There were a lot of unanswered questions. And the United States was in a turmoil at the time administratively because we were shifting from a war economy and a military-industrial command structure to a civilian structure. So the military was still dominant, and they wanted to keep control of this until they knew what was happening. So they created, and remember, General Marshall was our Secretary of State at the time. He was a four-star, a five-star general. These people selected certain representatives from the military-industrial complex that they controlled, generals and admirals and certain scientists that worked with the military and worked with industrial planning. These men were designated as a task force to take charge of any event that followed. And one did. Almost a year later, on the 25th of March of 1978, the next one came down, 1948, the next one did crash, and it came down under observation by radar, so that we knew where it landed at the time that it struck the ground, and a helicopter was over it in less than an hour. It reported what it observed, and the plan generated by these people from the military-industrial complex after the Roswell crash was immediately put into place. All of the generals and admirals and advisors and scientists were contacted and ordered to proceed to a base in Colorado, where they were picked up and driven to the crash site. Now, all of these men have gone to the scene to see for themselves what an alien vehicle looks like, and they were going to advise General Marshall directly, who was controlling everything from remote position for telephones, on how to proceed. And when an operation is that big, you can't cover everything up. We discovered that the owner of the property where the vehicle came down was arrested in his house with his family, and they were kept in the house for 4 days, not allowed to go outside or anything. All the roads in the area were blocked. All access was closed. People that lived close enough to know something about it were kept in their houses. Now, if it never happened, then this evidence wouldn't exist. But now we are finding solid evidence that something strange did happen and that these events actually took place. Then we found people who observed the recovery of the craft from a distance, that saw the task force moving across off roads over country to a secure military facility at Los Alamos. And with these leads, we were able to turn up other witnesses, all of whom had been sworn to secrecy by their superiors at the time they participated in these events. And only a few of them would talk to us, and only on condition that they not be identified because of their vulnerability. What happens in a case of violation of security oaths of this nature, they could lose all pay and allowances due or ever to become due. They could be imprisoned they could find a lot of things that none of them could stand.
Through Secretary of State General Marshall, the security of the UFO situation was intensified. A closer relationship developed between the military and Majestic 12. As time passed, the power of Majestic 12 grew stronger. Virgil Armstrong was an intelligence officer with the CIA and worked with highly classified assignments. He retired with the rank of major.
I received documents which said that a UFO had landed in the middle of White Sands, New Mexico proving grounds, and that this object was inert, was under surveillance, and would be kept under surveillance until they could determine whether it was hostile or friendly. It later turned out that it was friendly in that the occupants were dead, and when we got aboard there were 5 bodies. The bodies were diminutive in size, in other words 3.5 feet. The largest one was just under 4 feet. 2 of them were obviously the commanding officers because 2 of them wore epaulets on their shoulders. Later turns out that they were all male. When we flew them back to Wright-Patterson, of course, the examination, physical examination, and the autopsy, of course, revealed that they were indeed all male.
From descriptions given by several witnesses, the aliens have very large eyes, a small nose, and a small mouth. They are usually about 3 feet 6 inches in height and have no body hair.
Liukuestesukka pitää ja leikki luistaa. Pendi.
Nyt on nurkat valttia. Upea kotimainen kulmasohva Classic, vain 4990. Tuusulan suurhallista.
Foto 1. Kuva Ahti. Asiakkaan etu. Ensikuviesi mukana saat albumin.
Nopeus, kokemus ja laatu on vuosien varrella aikaan saatu. Foto 1 ja kuva Ahti.
Miksi eläkevakuutus kannattaa ottaa Apollosta?
Eikö se ole se kaikkein edullisin?
Kyllä. Soita numeroon 9800 2705 tai hae esite R-kioskilta.
President Truman ordered a heightened level of security after the capture of a live alien from a UFO which had crashed. Because of the ever-increasing numbers of UFO sightings at the time, it was decided to create a project called Blue Book, which was designed to suppress public knowledge and create an atmosphere of ridicule around the subject of UFOs. Professor J. Allen Hynek was a professor of astronomy and an astronomical advisor to the United States Air Force on their UFO educational program.
And I know the job they had. They were told not to excite the public. Don't rock the boat. And I saw it in my own eyes happen that whenever a case happened that they could explain, which is quite a few, they made point of that and let that out to the media. Things that the cases that were very difficult to explain, they would jump handsprings to keep the media away from it. For they had a job to do, to, whether rightfully or wrongly, to keep the public from getting excited.
A live alien was captured in 1948 after a UFO crashed in America. He refused to communicate for 1 year and was given the name EBE, or Extraterrestrial Biological Entity. He later began to communicate and gave details of his home planet. EBE had a large crystal which he linked to his mind telepathically and was able to communicate with his own race. He was also able to see into the past and future and perform many other amazing feats. He told of believing in the universe as the supreme being and stated that his race lived in harmony without wars and had nearly eliminated all diseases. He said they lived to approximately 800 years of age and that their technology was far in advance of ours. The authorities were amazed by the things they were shown through the crystal. EBE was able to communicate with huge spaceships which were holding orbital positions thousands of miles from the Earth. He told them that their crafts were capable of reaching areas in the universe beyond our imagination, and that they were operated by thought control coupled to biological computers, and consequently did not have any control systems as we understood them. He talked about his planet and how their technology had created a system where everything was self-functional and did not require a workforce to operate it, and that everything was monitored from a central control system. He said that technicians were present there. He said their power source was eternal energy from the cosmos. He told them that his race didn't have a government like Earth, but a society governed by wise elders who sat in council to make decisions of policy. They did not have a monetary system because the needs of the people were catered for by the Federation, which made them all equal. At the request of the aliens, a meeting was arranged with President Eisenhower in 1954. It took place amid tight security at a secret location. At this meeting, negotiations took place regarding the permitted presence of the aliens on Earth. Eisenhower told the aliens that the world was not yet ready for them.
Eisenhower witnessed an alien demonstration of technology and power at Muroc Dry Lake, which is now called Edwards Air Force Base. I believe we made a deal, and the deal was that in exchange for super technology, super weapons technology, we would agree to ignore the abductions that were going on. He made it more military-oriented than, say, a civilian president would have. And it's this, I think, that has let his actions let the real power of the executive office slip through the hands of the president into MJ-12. The President of the United States does not have a high enough clearance to know the whole thing. And it's interesting to note that above top secret, there's 38 levels of clearances. Eisenhower is the last president to have a full briefing on the alien problem. There was a disdain of elected officials throughout the intelligence and military communities, and they just didn't like elected officials. So every president since then has not had high enough clearance to know the whole problem. Now they know there's aliens, they know we've recovered saucers, and they know that we're trying to get technology. But there are certain other things which probably only about 25 people on the face of this earth know.
When coming down to Earth, it ceases to be free space, with systems to monitor every move.
I happened to see flying saucer on several occasions on the radar. I even intercepted with 4 jets in '55, and it was clear to me that the saucers we intercepted could hear what I told the pilots, because they reacted on my instructions to the pilots. It was one day when one of my people in the radar called me and said, "Major," I was captain at that, "Captain, we have something on the screen which passes with a speed of 18,000 kilometers per hour. Impossible. Nothing could fly with that speed. I went out there, yes. They were passing with 18,000 kilometers per hour. All of a sudden, after some while, they did not pass anymore. They were stationary around the field. And they came and they left without we could see it. All of a sudden they were there. All of a sudden when the sweep came around, they were gone. I contacted the operations officer and the station commander. They both came out and they wouldn't believe me. I said, "Give me 4 aircraft and I'll intercept them." Okay. Sometimes there were about 20 objects around the field, and sometimes we were down to a few. It was fog, and therefore a lot of people afterwards said, "Oh, it was inversion," but it was not. It's proven afterwards it could not be inversion, which is a meteorological phenomenon. So at 11 o'clock, I had 4 jets at the runway, and at 11 o'clock the fog lifted so we could take off. And I ordered the 4 jets to take off. In that moment there was 12 objects around the field. And when I said you are cleared for takeoff to intercept unidentified flying objects, 10 of them went away. Right when the sweep came back, there was only 2 left. One 10 miles north of the field, one 15 miles south of the field. I sent the 2 aircraft to the north and the 2 aircraft to the south. 2 aircraft to the north came first, and I said, your boogie, which is the object, is 12 o'clock straight ahead. 12 o'clock, distance 5 miles, altitude unknown. Do we have it in sight? Gone. Came the next one. When it came up, I said, your boogie is 12 o'clock, range 5 miles, altitude unknown. Do we have it in sight? Gone. So it was clear they could hear what I said.
But while the visitors monitor our every move with their superior technology, being technically advanced does not always ensure their own safety. This was proved by the UFO crash in the Kalahari Desert in 1989. One of the most documented cases of all time referred to a 60-foot wide spacecraft which was forced down on the border of South Africa. This craft impacted with the desert at high speed, causing a crater 450 feet in diameter and 36 feet deep. Official military documents reveal that the craft entered South African airspace at 1:45 p.m. on the 7th of May 1989 and was intercepted by 2 Mirage jet fighters. Because the craft failed to respond to communication, one of the fighters was ordered to attack the craft with an experimental laser cannon. This caused the craft to lose altitude and crash.
After the craft was retrieved, it was removed to a secret Air Force base. And on arrival at this base, it was found a door had partially opened in the side of the craft. Hydraulic pumping gear was brought to the scene, and the door was forced open. When this was done, 2 aliens staggered out of the craft, and it was found that one appeared to be seriously injured. They were immediately arrested and removed to a medical center, where a medical team was sent in to try to assist. The authorities at the scene entered the UFO, and hieroglyphics were found inside the machine, alien hieroglyphics, of course, and various items of electronic equipment were also removed from the craft.
When the military entered the craft, they quickly removed portable equipment and instruments, some of which were considered useful as potential weapons. This was not